There are people who can't live a normal day here and then. Imagine a man living for months in the middle of the ocean without food, or a sole survivor of a plane crash. Well, these are just two of our amazing people who survived the impossible, and much more awaits. By the way, I've noticed that most of you watching this haven't subscribed to the channel, so if you like the video, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It's absolutely free, and you can always change your mind, you know. With that said, let's begin our video with our first entry. Number 10. ISRAFIL. A gunshot victim from Dayton, Ohio, was famous for his recovery from a deadly injury that led to him losing about half of his head. His brain tissue and one half of his skull were destroyed, yet his scalp skin survived and folded inward when the underlying tissue was removed. As a consequence, once the hole in his skull was plugged with a silicone block, the flap of skin was pulled over and hair grew back, giving him a rather normal appearance. His recovery astounded his doctors, and he went on to enjoy a healthy life for years, until his death in 2019. Number 9. MAURO Prosperi. MAURO Prosperi is an Italian police officer who lost his way in the Sahara Desert in 1994. A keen athlete and long-distance runner, Prosperi took part in the Marathon of the Sands in Morocco, a 6-day-long endurance race in one of the driest and most barren environments on the planet. One day after going off track, a sandstorm came out of nowhere and caused him to lose his way. In order to survive, he had to kill and eat bats, was forced to drink his own urine, walked through the desert for 9 days, eating insects and reptiles, until he found a small village from where he was flown to a hospital, where doctors said his liver had nearly completely failed, having traveled 180 miles. Despite all the hardships he had to go through, he remained an enthusiastic runner and even returned and completed the race in 2012. Number 8. Greg Rasmussen. In 2003, Greg had an incident when his plane crashed when he was traveling somewhere in Africa. He was left injured badly and totally at the mercy of the sun and the wild animals. He couldn't feel his lower body, but was conscious enough to know what to do. The hardest part came when he was not able to call anyone for help. He spent 2 days taking shelter inside the wreckage of the plane, all terrified of the wild animals that might attack him. But gladly he made it out of there when the rescuers spotted him. And even though his legs were almost shattered, many surgeries, months of rehab, and years of determination, he was able to walk again. Number 7. FRANE SELAK. Called the luckiest unlucky man of the world, FRANE SELAK was a music teacher with an extraordinary fate. SELAK was known as the man who looked death in the eye and lived to tell the tale, again and again, 7 times in total. First, a boat with SELAK on swerved off the road, but he managed to survive. Second, in 1962, when he was traveling on a train, a boulder fell on the tracks. The train fell off the tracks and crashed into a river. Well, SELAK survived. Then in 1963, he had a flight, and the plane suffered a technical malfunction, causing it to crash into a boulder. However, SELAK still survived, as he was sucked out of the plane at a height of 800 meters and fell on a haystack. In 1973, his car burst into flames, while he survived just like previous times without any major injuries. In 1995, hit by a bus, no serious injuries at all. Number 6. BAKARI. In 2009, BAKARI was barely 12 years old when Yemenian Flight 626 crashed into the Indian Ocean, taking everyone on board, except her. The world's press called the French teenager the Miracle Girl, when she said she stayed afloat for 14 hours by clinging to a piece of plane debris despite not being able to swim and having no life gear. There were 152 other persons on board from Sana'a, Yemen to Moroni, Comoros Islands, who all died, including Bahia's mother. Due to the shock, she was in her mind and was in a constant state of denial. She kept saying that there had been no incident. You can't really call her lucky as she lost her mother, but well, she did survive the impossible. Number 5. Louis Zamperini. Louis Zamperini rose to prominence as one of the all-time great middle-distance runners. When World War II broke out, his life changed dramatically. He drifted for 47 days in the Pacific on a life raft. Then years of famine, sickness, and abuse by brutal Japanese jail officers afflicted him. He eventually came home after the president had officially proclaimed him dead. Not just this, he also survived a plane crash, then drank rainwater and ate fish and birds to survive. The whole life of Zamperini was extraordinary, and a film was released a few years after his life story. Unbroken, directed by Angelina Jolie, was released in 2014. Despite the fact that he died soon before Jolie's film was released in theaters, Zamperini was able to see it from his hospital bed before dying in 2013 at the age of 97. Number 4. Chris GURSKY. He was forced to hang on the glider with one hand and his pilot with the other for more than 2 minutes, or risk a potentially deadly fall to the ground. GURSKY uploaded the clip on YouTube a few days later under the title "Swiss Mishap," with a warning, "Content may be distressing to some. That includes my wife." He had traveled to Switzerland with his wife for a vacation and chose to go gliding, not understanding what he was in for. His spectacular experience rapidly devolved into a harrowing struggle for survival, with him anxiously clutching the instructor's leg, shoulder, and a crossbar to keep from dying. Number 3. TSUTOMU Yamaguchi. The man who survived not one, but 2 nuclear bombs and lived long to tell the coming generations about it. He's unique since no one has ever walked in his shoes before. Many people have been the only survivors of hardly one disaster, but no one has ever survived 2 nuclear explosions on record. The first of those bombs was dropped on Hiroshima, and the second was dropped 3 days later in Nagasaki, and he was present in both cities at the very moment the bombs were detonated. His relatives didn't even identify him at first because of the horrific burns on his hands and face when he came back to them after the first bomb. Despite the fact that he was on the approach of death, Yamaguchi forced himself out of bed and recovered so he could tell future generations about the horrifying history he had witnessed. Number 2. Joe Simpson. Joe Simpson and Simon Yates were climbing in the Peruvian Andes together when Simpson's leg broke. As night struck and a storm loomed, they were forced to continue in the dark, separated by only 45 meters of rope and unable to communicate. When the injured Simpson was unintentionally dropped over a cliff, Yates clung to the rope for nearly an hour before making the fateful choice to break the rope, sending his comrade tumbling to his death. Simpson somehow landed on a ledge with no additional injuries. He knew he was going to die, but he didn't want to die alone. So he crawled and crawled, 6 kilometers back to base camp in 4 days, just in time to rejoin with Yates, who was packing up to go. Not only did Simpson survive, but he also survived long enough to write a book about his adventure and have a film about it created, Touching the Void. Number 1. Harrison Okene. A tugboat was navigating bumpy waters off the coast of Nigeria when a rogue wave smashed into the vessel, breaking the tow rope and sank the ship. When the boat flipped over and began to sink, Harrison Okene, the cook, was in the restroom. He was thrown out of it in his boxer shorts in the early morning darkness. He somehow made it into the engineer's office and discovered a little pocket of air. Okene's chances of life appeared to be near zero when he was almost nude, had no food or fresh water, and was trapped in a chilly, damp chamber with a depleting supply of oxygen. He was there for about 3 days, surviving only on the little air there was. Okene finally made it to the surface when a rescue team found him. Stephen Callahan. Not just starvation, dehydration, and predators, Stephen Callahan, just like every other survivor, had to fight his mental and emotional strain as well. Yep, just like the life of Pi, but a real one. Stephen suffered a shipwreck and had to spend 76 days on a life raft. He drank rainwater, ate raw fish, lived in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean for months, and made it out alive somehow. He was even asked by the director of the movie Life of Pi to serve as a consultant. Callahan continued his career as an offshore sailor, naval architect, author, editor, and associate to sailing magazines. And one important thing is that among the items he managed to retrieve from the damaged ship was a copy of Sea Survival, a survival manual written by Dougal Robertson, who survived 38 days after his boat was sunk in 1971. That is it for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video. Do like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to not miss any of the upcoming amazing videos. Thank you once again.